Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to Canada for the first time in what feels like a very long time actually. So we're going to have a look at a beer from a brewery that I've never tried anything from before. I've also not reviewed all that many beers from this province either, so that makes it doubly interesting. But these guys have a very good reputation, and they're one of the Canadian breweries that are really starting to break out here in Europe actually. So very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. This also might be my first one I've tried from Canada in this particular style bracket as well, but I honestly can't remember for sure. But yeah, let's see what this one has in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to go to Toronto in Ontario, and we're going to have a look at my first beer from Bellwoods Brewery. So this particular beer is from their Jelly King series. This is the Raspberry and Peach edition. It comes in at 6.5% ABV, and yeah, I guess we can just call this one a fruited sour beer. But it looks as if this batch has been brewed for the Swedish market because it's got Swedish on the can, which I'm assuming the Canadian one wouldn't. So yeah, this is pretty cool actually. But this beer was released as part of the Tillfälligt temporary assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for it was at the start of October 2022, if I remember correctly. We also had this beer on tap in the Bishop's Arms in Gustav Adolfs Torg in Malmö, and it was very popular actually, and I remember trying it and thinking it was pretty interesting. So when I saw there was cans coming out, I thought, you know, we need to have a go at this on the channel, and we also don't get to review enough Canadian beer on the on this channel, of course. But you can, of course, check out my Canadian beer tubing colleagues. There's the likes of Beer Patrol, there's Lee Russell's, one of the really old school ones, there's Redbeard. There's a good number of Canadian beer tubers out there these days, so do go and check out some of their channels and you'll get some really interesting reviews. But yeah, Lee Russell is one of the really old school ones. Love that guy, he's great fun. But yeah, let's crack on with this then and see what we have. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Bellwoods Brewery. This is the very first time that I'm reviewing one of their beers, of course, but hopefully not the last. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated, and you can, of course, go into the channel homepage and use the channel's geography-based tagging system. You can search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever you like, and you can, of course, check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You will find this one in the Canadian playlist. So yeah, let's go on then and chat a little bit about Bellwoods Brewery. On to my brewery notes that I made. So, Bellwoods Brewery, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Toronto in Ontario in Canada, and the company was founded back in 2011 by Luke Pestle and Mike Clark. So Luke has a background originally in biochemical engineering, and he previously worked at Amsterdam Brewing in the city, while Mike was also a brewer there. But they started home brewing together during their time working for Amsterdam, and they would apparently also go down to the US to do what they called craft beer runs, so bring back a load of American craft beer up to Toronto, because apparently there really just wasn't that much of a selection in Toronto at the time, or wider Ontario, of course. But apparently they were both inspired to start Bellwoods because nobody in Toronto was brewing things that were very hoppy or, you know, Brett beers either. So they took over an old car repair garage on Ossington Avenue in the Little Portugal area in the south of the city, quite close to the water actually. But they named their brewery Bellwoods after the nearby Trinity Bellwoods Park. And around the time they started, they were also started what they called the City Hops Project, and they were growing hops in about 8 or so different locations around the city, on rooftops and in parks and, you know, stuff like this. But they managed to successfully grow Cascade and Chinook, but I wasn't really able to find out what happened with the hops, because they weren't producing enough to use in, you know, a single batch of beer apparently. But they did manage to find out that it is possible to grow hops in the city. So yeah, quite an interesting concept. But they opened up their brew pub to the public in 2012, and they've gradually expanded the brewing capacity there over the years. They added a bottle shop very early on, and for their 10th anniversary they've just kind of revamped the place from what I understand. But later on in 2016, having had good success with the brew pub, they opened up a second brewery on Halfis Road in the North York area to give them a bigger production volume, and this location has also given them the space to do a lot more barrel aging, and it also has its own on-site tap room as well. But the yearly output of this brewery apparently is, I think it was 1,200 hectolitres, so what's that, 120,000 litres, something like that. It could be 1 point, was it 1,200 or 12,000 hectolitres? I saw it. These guys either produce 120,000 or 1.2 million litres. I think these guys are quite well established, so I'm guessing it's 1.2 million litres of beer per year. But anyway, as of October 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 275 different kinds of beers, and they've pretty much done a bit of everything. You'll find the big malty guys, like, the Imperial Stouts and the barley wines and Scotch ales and stuff from them, but you'll also find a lot of IPAs and kind of fruited sours and stuff like this. The Jelly King is one other kind of really popular series of beer. But yeah, that is all I can really tell you about Bellwoods Brewery for the moment. If you want to learn more from these guys, or learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done, and there will no doubt be more to come. I need to go and visit Toronto and Quebec and Ottawa and things like that at some stage. I've never done that, that eastern side of Canada. So yeah, that is something that's definitely on the cards for the future, and I'm sure Bellwoods will be one of the breweries that I do go and visit. So yeah, let's just crack on with this one then and see what we have. I'm very curious to see what this beer has in store for us, because I can't really remember actually what this one was like when we had it at the pub. So yeah, as you can see, artwork of this one is pretty interesting, and all the Jelly King beers have a very similar style of artwork. It's usually the colour scheme that changes. But yeah, there you can see Bellwoods Brewery, 6.5%, 473 millilitres, so that is one American pint, because of course the Canadians tend to use the silly American measurements instead of the good European ones. But there you can see the Bellwoods Brewery symbol, and that was on, usually they had red bottle caps, and that was in white on the bottle caps, but we're doing it with they're doing it with cans now. But yeah, as I say, 473 millilitres. I think I paid like 60, maybe 65 Swedish kroner for this. So that is about €6.50, somewhere in the region of £6 sterling, and it will be about $7 American. So that's going to be what, about 8 Canadian, something like that. I don't know how that compares to the price in Canada, but it gives you guys watching a rough idea. But like we said, I've been lying to you. This is a 5.6% one, not 6.5. So yeah, 5.6% sour beer. This one with raspberry and peach added into the brew, and it's dry hopped. So yeah, let's crack this open. The Jelly King Raspberry and Peach Edition. Let's see what we have here. My first Canadian beer in quite a while, actually. I think the last one we reviewed was perhaps from Dieu de Cille, who are one of the old school breweries from Quebec, actually. These guys have been in Europe for a very long time, Dieu de Cille. God in heaven, if I remember the French rightly. But yeah, that's good. So, anyway, there we are. As you can see then, this beer's kind of poured exactly as you would expect. So, I'm not going to do it with this finger, of course. Destroyed this on a glass when I was working at the pub the other day. But yeah, as you can see, this one's poured with a finger and a bit of a frothy, I would say kind of cream coloured head. There are a few bumpy bubbles in there, but overall it's it's got quite a nice little bit of lighter foamy character to it. But yeah, 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there. But I mean, overall it does look very, very nice. But yeah, colour wise it is pretty much what you would expect. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar's caramelised, thus you get a better colour. You get a darker colour of beer. 3, any adjuncts that you put in, or 4, any barrel aging that you do will affect it too. When it comes to kind of sour beers like this, the fruits that you put in are obviously going to play a role. But yeah, this one you can see the peach and the raspberry will be kind of playing a role. I mean, the most potent fruit I've seen when it comes to colouring beers, that it's like blackberries and blueberries and stuff, they can just turn the thing dark as hell. But yeah, I think this one, you can see with the colour there, it's a mix of peach. It is more leaning toward the kind of peachy colour, but you can, when you put the light through this beer, you can see the sort of tint that the raspberries are giving it. We should also point out this one contains oats. Was it wheat as well? Yeah, this one contains wheat and oat, so they will be partially responsible for the kind of haziness that this beer has as well. As you can see, the head has just faded away to be a nice kind of thin foamy layer there with a bit of a ring around the edge of the glass. But overall, it does look pretty nice. One or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of it, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there. And yeah, it looks pretty nice, this one. So let's take a closer look at the aroma and see what this beer has in store for us. Yeah, this is pretty damn nice actually. I don't, and this is the funny thing, as I say, I'm sure we had this on tap in the pub, but I don't remember this beer actually. I really don't. I maybe just took a little sip of it when we first got it on, and that was it. But yeah, that does smell very, very nice actually. First impression of it is you get quite a bit of raspberry out of this one, but you know, you can smell the peach kind of underneath, and it has got a big kind of creamy note to it. And I like the fact that it has hops in it. You know, it's a bit of a debate among brewers as to whether there is value in using hops in these kind of modern fruity sour beers. You know, there's two sides to the argument. The likes of Vault City and Holy Goat back home in Scotland do it, and it adds a little bit more depth to the flavour. But likewise, here in Scandinavia, a lot of the breweries that we have, you know, in Sweden, such as like Duck Pond, Elm 11, Fermenterona, Morgendagens, these kind of guys, they don't put hops in these kind of beers, and because they say it takes away from the fruity side of things. And indeed, in the kind of old school Belgian funky type sours, you know, they used old hops so that it didn't detract from the kind of sour side of the beer. So, you know, there's two sides of the coin when it comes to this. But with this one, you can certainly smell a nice green component to it. It's got a lovely backbone. But yeah, let's try and break that aroma down for you and just describe it a little bit more in depth, if you like. So, for me, aroma-wise, this beer, yeah, aroma-wise, this beer I think is really, yeah, aroma-wise, this beer, it really has, in the malt base, you can certainly smell some of that fresh white bread crust, absolutely. I mean, above that, you've got a really nice kind of, you certainly do have some nice kind of fresh, but still quite thick white bread in there. That'll be the barley malt and, of course, the wheat giving you that. Um, there is definitely a little bit of an OT creaminess to it as well. And you get some kind of like Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotch type things. I don't know how good a descriptor that will be for Canadians that are watching the video. The Werther's Original. It's a German sweet, of course, that's quite popular in Europe. But yeah, butterscotch, butter candy, I'm pretty sure you all know exactly what I mean with that. So yeah, it's actually got a really kind of almost yogurty, petit filou type note to it as well. So as I say, the malt base in this one, it's bread crust, fresh white bread. You can smell the wheat thickening it out. You do get a little touch of bitiness from the wheat at the back of the nose, incidentally, which is quite interesting. But you've also got that smooth, creamy oaty character, and there's also a little bit of that. Yeah, you also have a good little bit of the kind of, you do have a little bit of that Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy type note as well. But as I say, the beer, there are little tiny vanilla elements to this one as well, and that kind of gives you the impression of like a petit filou, yogurty type quality to the beer. So that's quite interesting. Other than that, maybe just a teeny little bit of a slightly woody note coming out of this one. So that's kind of interesting. Other than that, I don't think we need to see anything about the malty base in this beer. Beyond that, well, above that, yeah, you certainly have a little bit of a yeah, above that you certainly have a little bit of nice grassiness and things in there. So yeah, the way that that goes together is really nice. So yeah, nice little bit of grassiness in there. I do get a little touch of earthiness in the back of the nose, but there's the green component for me really leans toward a kind of brighter and kind of fresh, wetly cut grass. Wet, fresh, yeah, wet, freshly cut grass. Getting my grammar all mixed up. Not good at speaking English these days. Never was, in fairness. But yeah, the a little teeny bit of smooth earthiness, little touch of floral character, but yeah, the green component is all about the grassy side of things for me. So yeah, I do like how this goes together, this beer, for sure. Now, on the fruity side of things, it is pretty much what you'd expect. Of course, you're getting some peach out of it, and of course, you're getting some raspberry. So the peach for me is kind of the one that's giving you the kind of fruity backbone to the beer, but it's the raspberry that's giving you the kind of tartness and sourness and things like that. So you smell the raspberry higher up in the nose, and as I say, it's a lot sharper, but you get some nice juiciness out of it. A little bit of figgy character in there. You get a little bit of a kind of figgy character in there. Little bit of figgy character in there as well. And a wee bit of an almost black curranty note as well. These are all kind of placebo things, of course, because the fruits are raspberry and peach, but you do get some of these other notes going on, as I say, a little bit of a, a little bit of, as I say, raspberry note, a little bit of, a little bit of raspberry note, a little bit of black currant, all of this kind of thing. As I say, a nice big kind of peachy backbone to the beer as well. The more that I smell of it, I do actually start to think the peach is giving you some of the tartness too. But I don't know why. I think it must just be the kind of Scottish point of reference, because a lot of our desserts are, of course, based on berries and the kind of tartness that berries give you. It's not often that we have so much of the tropical fruits in our desserts, right enough. But yeah, the way the aroma goes together in this beer, I think, is very, very nice. But let's put the rest of it into the glass and we'll have a taste. Oh, maybe that's a bit too much, yeah. There we go. So this is an American pint glass, apparently. You know, I'm very much like that. I had to just be like, challenge accepted. So there we are. Yeah, so I think it's about time that we very carefully take a taste of this one. So yeah, this is the Jelly King Raspberry and Peach Edition from Bellwoods Brewery in Toronto, Ontario, in Canada. As I always say, take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer, but we are going to taste this one now. Slàinte, skål, and cheers. I was forgetting that this was a 473 and not a 440. That was the thing there. That's why I put the rest of it in, because the 440 would fill to about here. But yeah, flavour wise, this is quite nice. It actually reminds me of some of the Holy Goat beers from Scotland, actually. It's kind of like that. But it's a really nice sour beer, this one. And I like the fact that it's got the hoppy character to it as well. It's different. I've had so many kind of smoothie or Nordic sours, as they're calling them these days, but to have something like this which has the hoppy side to it, I think is quite interesting. So yeah, what can we say about this beer then? Yeah, it has got a big tart impact to it. That's the first thing. You've got a nice bit of green floral component in there as well. And yeah, you've got the malty side of it isn't quite as creamy and sort of smoothie sour like as I was expecting. So yeah, this beer's got a wee bit more kind of depth to it and things. So it's quite different from the other sours I've had in recent times, like I've said. So yeah, let's kind of try and break this down a wee bit and just, see how we go. So, where do we start then? Middle third of your palate then. So, backbone of the beer. You have a little bit of that kind of fresh white bread crust, and it almost feels as if it's got a little bit of the kind of flour sitting on it. So, yeah, I quite like that. So that's definitely there. You almost get a slight little woody backbone to this one as well. There is a little touch of woodiness coming out of this one for sure. But yeah, I think that is very, very interesting. Yeah, so a little bit of woodiness in there, the bread crust. On top of that, you get the fresh white bread. You can feel the wheat just kind of thickening that out a little bit, but the bread actually comes across as being kind of wet in a way. And toward the front of that middle third of your palate, you do, as I say, just get a little touch of vanilla to it, which I think is quite interesting. So you do get a little bit of that kind of yogurty petit filou thing that I often talk about in these fruity sour beers. You do get a little bit of that toward the front of the middle third of your palate. But as I say, on top of that kind of bready layer that we've just spoken about, you get the oaty creaminess. So you can feel that there's like a little circle. There is a little circle in the middle of your palate with this beer, and that's the oaty kind of creaminess. So in the dead center, it's very, very creamy, but just as you move further out toward the edge of the palate, there you start to get a little bit of a kind of more dry character out of the oats. But of course, that sat on top of this really wet white bready character that we've just spoken about. In the middle of the palate too, there's a good little bit of Werther's Original type quality to it. Yeah, there's a little bit of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy type quality, which I do enjoy. So yeah, the way that that goes together, I think, is very, very nice. So yeah, the way that this beer goes about its business on the malty side of things is quite interesting, actually. It really isn't kind of what I expected in that way. I'd be curious to see what this one would taste like without the hops. But yeah, I don't know how fresh this beer is either, and it's something, I don't, because obviously when you import a beer over here, Systembolaget take quite a bit of time to get it on the shelf. That's the thing. So yeah, you have things like that all over the place. When you've got a state-run alcohol shop, getting the beers out there fresh on the shelves can be a little bit more difficult in a way. But yeah, this one, I would be curious to try it without the hops as a smoothie sour. But yeah, with its Jelly King. Jelly King, of course, all of them have hops in them. So for me, it's quite nice. This really does remind me more of the kind of Scottish sour beers that I've had rather than the Swedish, Danish, Norwegian ones. But yeah, the way that this beer goes together is pretty nice in that sense. I think we've said everything we need to about the middle third of the palate in this beer. So let's go to the back third of the palate. So the border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you get a little bit of bready build up in there again. We touch of bread crust. Then the base of the beer is kind of you do get more of that bread crust in there, and it's a little touch more grainy. Above that, you get the white bready layer, and the white bready layer is actually a lot more kind of airy, if that makes sense. It's a little bit more airy, and you can actually taste more of a kind of fresh, fluffy white bread, which is interesting. And on top of that, you get the wheat, and the wheat does have just a little tiny touch of bitiness to it. And above all of that, you start to get the more yeasty, kind of airy bready qualities coming out of the beer. So, as I say, that's quite interesting. So yeah, but yeah, the above that there's the. I don't think there's anything else. I think yeah, you've got the yeasty ester, the yeasty flavors in this beer. It's almost like a kind of honeycomb white bread sort of thing. So you just get a little bit of sweetness on the top of that back third of your palate. But absolutely, back third of your palate, you can feel the flavour goes further forward. It comes further forward, then it just kind of squashes together that little bit more. Yeah, the flavour just squashes together that little bit more, and it just condenses down, so it's good. Yeah, I think that's it. I think that is everything we need to say about the malty side of this beer. Now, in the back corners of the palate, we'll move on to the hoppy side of things. Now, back corners of the palate, you do get a little touch of earthiness there. As you move further forward, it's got a little bit of a herbal quality, and as you push toward the kind of front corners of the palate, you've got more of a kind of floral aromatic sort of thing going on with this one. And this beer does actually have a surprising amount of floral aromaticity compared to what the aroma would have you believe. So yeah, that is interesting. So, yeah, the way that that goes together is it is quite nice. Round the front curve of the palate, of course, you do get some of the kind of grassy notes coming out of the beer, which is interesting. And yeah, as I say, I do quite enjoy that side of it too. But on the front third of your palate then, let's look at that and the fruity side of the beer. We need to talk about the impact with this one too. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of bready build up there. So you can feel that. The base of the front third of your palate is more kind of smooth and white bready, as we've said as well. So yeah, you've got a little bit of that kind of, you do get a little bit of that sort of smooth white bready kind of character there, but then all the fruity notes are just kind of sitting on top of that. I do wonder if this beer has Cascade in it. Something that tells me it just might be Cascade because, as I always say, on top of that front third of your palate, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters from the hops just roll their way out of the beer. And this one for me has that. It's got a little bit of that kind of slightly figgy type note that you always get from at least Cascade. And I'm quite sensitive to Cascade because one of my local beers back in Scotland is a Cascade hopped Czech style Pilsner, and it's, love that beer. The Harveston Schiehallion, absolutely love it. So I'm just getting some of the similar fruity notes out of this beer that I would normally get in that. But yeah, the fruity, the actual fruits from the adjuncts in this beer are quite interesting. When you take this beer in, and I've always said for me a good sour beer is one where it gives you a bit of impact and the fruit just mellows out nicely, or the sourness just mellows out nicely. This beer kind of does that as well. So behind the front curve of the palate, you've got a really nice, you've got a really nice kind of sharp raspberry character. So that just comes in right behind the tip of your tongue. It pushes out and just rolls further back. But on top of that sort of figgy, oily character that I was talking about, you get the nice kind of smooth, peachy notes to the beer. So that's quite interesting. So yeah, you've got a nice little bit of that kind of peachy, smooth note to it. Then above that, you've got the raspberries and the sharper raspberries. So yeah, it's just a little touch of yeah, you've got a little touch of kind of everything going on in this one. But yeah, a little bit of the sharp raspberries on top. They come in, they just kind of roll over the top of the peach, and the peach just has this nice kind of smoothness to it, and it's sort of the peach that's also aiding with that kind of petit filou, yogurty type vibe that the beer has as well. The other thing to note about this one is that whenever you add fruits into beer as an adjunct, I always feel they kind of roll around the edges of your palate and just take away a little bit of the beer's bitterness, and you can definitely get some of that in this beer for sure. You can feel that the raspberry, the kind of juiciness and the tartness of the raspberries just roll round that front edge of the tongue and suppress a little bit of the green component. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting beer, this one, flavour wise. I'd love to try the original and see what the original one is like, and then a few of the different fruity additions. But for me, this one really does remind me of some of the Holy Goat beers that I've had, and the raspberries in this one are really quite tart actually, which suits me because Scottish raspberries and Scottish berries generally tend to be pretty tart. So yeah, thumbs up from me in terms of flavour profile with this one. I'd love to try some of their stouts and IPAs and stuff like that. So we'll need to see what else we can get from Bellwoods Brewery going forward. But yeah, in terms of the mouthfeel then, to round off this review, mouthfeel wise, it's kind of middle of the road for me. Mid-bodied, smooth carbonation. It's actually got a good little bit of oiliness to it. It's not the thickest of sour beers that I've come across, but the kind of smoothie sours are the ones that would beat it in that sense. And I think the hops as well kind of give you the impression that the beer's not quite as thick as it might well be. So yeah, that's another thing to keep in mind with this one. This beer does contain hops, and that makes it feel a little bit less thick than it would be without them. But yeah, in terms of IBUs with this beer, it wouldn't surprise me if this one is maybe like a kind of 20-ish, 15 or 20 IBUs, something like that. But definitely, if it's dry hopped, I suppose technically speaking, it wouldn't be any IBU in there, because obviously you get most of your IBU from the early edition, a little bit from the late edition, and then other than that, the hops are giving you flavour and aroma. But this one, I do get, there must be at least 10 IBUs or something like that. I am getting just a little bit of bitterness from the hop in this beer for sure. But yeah, as we say, the malt base is very smooth. It's got a little touch of sweetness to it, and then you've got a nice tartness from the raspberry, the smoothness from the peach, and you've also got a little bit of the oily character from the from what I suspect is Cascade in this beer as well. But yeah, I think that's a good place to round off on this one. A really nice introduction to Bellwoods Brewery here on the channel. As I say, I'd be very curious to try both more beers from the Jelly King range, but also some of their other things. It'd be cool if we could get the IPAs with reasonable freshness. It'd be nice to try those. But trying something from the barrel aged side might be a possibility going forward. We'll just need to see. But yeah, I would love to review more Canadian beers on the channel. We'll just need to see what becomes available here in Europe. But yeah, let's leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite breweries are as well. Give me some Ontario or general Canadian beer and brewery recommendations. It'd be great to see those. I know there are a few people on the channel that watch from Canada. Russ in Calgary's been a regular for a long time. The Canadian beer tubers check out the videos every so often too. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. This was the Jelly King Raspberry and Peach edition from Bellwoods Brewery in Ontario, in Toronto, in Ontario, in Canada. Hopefully more Canadian reviews to come. Till the next time, slange it, skull, cheers, and see you guys very, very shortly.